So next, I would like to move to the presentation by Junko Ota from the Institute of Global Environmental Strategies.
Okay, thank you very much for this kind invitation, Professor Yanazov and Feeder G-Size. Thank you very much. My name is Junko Ota, a researcher at IGES. Today, I'd like to introduce Japan's zero carbon movement, current situation and challenges. And first, let me briefly introduce about IGES. IGES stands for Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. It is a research institution established by the Ministry of Environment, Japan. Our headquarters locates in Kanagawa Prefecture. And we also have a satellite offices, including Kyushu City, Kita-Kyushu City, Kobe City, Tokyo, and Bangkok, and small desk in Beijing and Delhi. I am at the Kita-Kyushu Urban Center. Also, Feeder, today's commentator, is currently doing his internship with us. Our main mission of Kita-Kyushu is to localize global agendas such as climate change, SDGs, and to implement projects on the ground. For today's topic, I'd like to introduce this publication. It's called Net Zero World 2050 Japan. I contributed for this English version of this. And all these publications from IGES you can download, mostly both English and Japanese language with the free of charge, so please do so. And in this publication, we analyze two types of future paths for Japan. Lock-in scenario, which has small change, business as usual, and transition scenario, which creates fundamental changes. And for more detail, please just take a look. It's very elaborate one. Now, let me talk about national movements in Japan. So here I illustrate the recent history of Japan's initiative towards zero carbon. So in the past 5 years, Japan has been a little bit criticized for not making a zero commitment or a very low midterm even goal. But finally, in October 2020, new Prime Minister Suga announced the carbon neutrality by 2050 at his very first speech at the Diet. So in his speech, he used the mixed terms like greenhouse gases, CO2, or decarbonization. So yes, ambiguity, what target, but I think by the end, it includes whole greenhouse gases. But anyway, 90% of the greenhouse gases in Japan are CO2, so mainly CO2. But before this country's announcement, some of the active local governments announced net zero, such as Tokyo government, Kyoto City, and Yokohama City, were the first group to announce the net zero at the local level. And then in April this year, climate summit in United States, the Japan raised the midterm target by 2030, which used to be only 26%, but now raised to 46% from the baseline 2013. And last month, an important step was taken in the Japanese parliament. Japan's national law for the climate change was revised to give a legal mandate to carbon neutrality. And incoming COP26 in Glasgow this year, Environmental Minister Koizumi is asked to take a lead on the international negotiation for carbon market mechanism, which is under the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. So let me highlight on this revision of the law. It's an amendment of the Act on Promotion of Global Warming Countermeasures. In Japanese, 地球温暖化対策推進法. This act was originally made in 1998 after the ratification of the Kyoto Protocol. Then several revisions were already made since. And the revision just happened last month was to inscribe clearly the carbon neutrality by 2050 as a national target, as well as a great support for the local governments. So what are the major changes and intentions behind this amendment? First, zero carbon is now the legal mandate and providing predictability and assurance for taking a long-term measures and investment for the private sectors. And second, concrete measures are articulated for the technical obstacle for renewable energy, such as simplifying the process and consideration of benefits to local regions. And thirdly, emission data from the private sector will be disclosed in a shorter time in a nice, easy manner. Also, reporting will be digitized. Therefore, this aims to enhance ESG investment. It's a special investment targeting environment, society, and governance. Besides this law, Japan also established a Green Innovation Fund to support mainly the private sectors for carbon neutral related research, development, and project and verification. This fund is 2 trillion yen, which is about 2 billion US dollars for the next 10 years. The amount may sound small compared to similar funds in US or Europe, but this fund is the largest scale in the context of Japan for this particular purpose. And currently, 3 working groups are operating to implement 18 specific areas of projects. And this is a trend of Japan's GHG emissions. Japan currently emits 1.2 billion tons of CO2 equivalent per year. And this amount has been declining since 2013. So 2013 is a peak, and that's why we set as a baseline. And this decline mainly due to the energy related improvement. And Japan's characteristics are about 90% of the emissions are energy-derived CO2 emissions, although some HFC gases are increasing. So therefore, energy takes a critical role in Japan's mitigation policy. Renewable ratio in Japan is about only 18%, nearly going to 20%. Not a big number compared to Europe and other countries, but increasing very rapidly, especially solar and wind. And nuclear is shrinking. Like Kazuki said, it won't be too much pushed for the future. Next, let me talk about the local level. Up to now, over 400 municipalities have announced a net zero carbon or GHG emissions by 2050. This is under the Environmental Ministry's initiative called Zero Carbon Cities. This is outstanding numbers. There are a total of 1,700 local governments exist in Japan, so about 1/4 of them announced. And according to the UNFCCC, the Secretariat of the Paris Agreement, Japan accounts for the second largest number of cities participating in the Race to Zero campaign, which is the international framework to announce zero carbon. So what's the situation in Kyushu? Kyushu currently 47 municipalities announced zero. So me and colleagues started this survey on the zero carbon cities in Kyushu since we locate in Fukuoka, Kyushu. So we visited some of the major zero carbon cities shown in this map and compare the findings in this publication. This publication is also available through our website, both English and Japanese. So we interviewed the local government officers who are in charge of zero carbon. And as a result, we found some commonalities and trends. First, emissions are all declining, but some emissions from certain sectors are bottleneck or even increasing, typically transportation, business, and household sectors. As for motivation to declare zero, there are various reasons. Some are political, coming from the top. Some are bottom-up, coming from the working level or even stakeholders. But what was common was the timing. Many of the local government were about to revise their climate change plan for the next 10 years, starting from this year. So it was very nice, timely manner to include such new initiative as their vision. Also aiming to achieve other important issues such as adaptation or agriculture or disaster prevention and SDGs. We also ask what will be the challenges to achieve zero. And many of the responses are overlap and common. And operation-wise within a city hall, although zero is a very comprehensive measures, most of the city hall environmental division is handling zero carbon. although they are trying to reach widely to energy or industry or transportation, urban planning sectors. And stakeholder engagement outside the city hall is kind of started to build, but just really kind of started. And there are also 2 layers of public administrations in Japan, prefecture covering all, and the cities, towns, and villages, 2 layers. But both layers are making their own climate change plan. Not yet at the current moment. There's no solid communication or common framework to separate or make a distinct role for each level. And for the human resource at the city hall, yes, they tend to have a short assignment, typically 3 years in one post. So it's really difficult to accumulate expertise. And challenges in the technical side. Emission data, yeah, everybody say emission data is not so great. Because at the present system, emission data at the local level is roughly calculated from the national data. So it's not so accurate or timely. Most recent data is about 3 years old. And to account renewable, many of the local regions produce renewable, but they cannot calculate a renewable consumption within a city because of this feed-in tariff system. So in this system, most renewable are sold to a large electric company like a Chubu Denryoku or Kyushu Denryoku, then distributed to various areas. So for the local governments can show how much renewable are produced within the region, but they cannot figure out how much of those are locally consumed within the same region. And lastly, zero carbon is a long-term goal towards 2050, so about next 30 years. Conventionally, public officers are used to develop plans for the next only 5 years or 10 years at most. But now suddenly they need to plan for the next 30 years without much technical skills or justification. From here, let me show some good examples from Kyushu. First one is the joint declaration. Kumamoto City and 17 surrounding municipalities jointly announced zero carbon, which also means zero carbon offsetting. So they also try to make a plan they try to make one plan with those 18 municipalities together. Then Nagasaki City and 2 neighboring towns followed a similar way. Both cases are based on collaborative framework existed before the zero announcement. And those neighbors are commuting towns, therefore it's effective to think about common measures such as for transportation or public utility and disaster management. And the second feature is the climate emergency declaration, which is different from zero carbon, but just politically announcing climate is something wrong. So Iki City from the Nagasaki prefecture was the first one to declare this in Japan. Then Oki Town, Oguni Town, Chinatown followed. And there are increasing natural disasters, especially in Kyushu recently, with causing a tremendous damage. So not taking action against climate change is becoming the risk for the local governments. And thirdly, SDGs-like approach with the large stakeholder engagement is very evident in the big cities like Kita-Kyushu, Kumamoto, Kagoshima. Those are also selected for Japan's SDGs Future City program. For example, Kagoshima City has established a partner platform with the private sectors, also designing workshop for the youth, young generation, and advertising zero concept to the general public in a very visible way. And Kyushu has been leading producing renewable productions in Japan. Sometimes they have to stop the solar because too much supply, and also contains future potential to increase further as well. So I plotted here just the large scale or unique ones that I visited. Largest geothermal locates in Hachobaru, Oita, and largest scale wind farm in Kushima City in the south tip of Kyushu. And largest offshore wind farm is now planning to be built in Kita-Kyushu City, over 40 offshore windmills. And Japan's first floating type of offshore wind was piloted in Goto Island, Nagasaki. Floating type is very susceptible for typhoon. And later Fido will explain about this detail. This is my last slide. I'd like to share a new outcome just publicized in this month by Japan's Cabinet Office, which is a regional zero carbon roadmap connecting local and national. So it's a roadmap towards 2050. It's a 50-page document with lots of detail, but just to give you a short brief, they put the emphasis for the very strong incentive for the next 5 years. They think the next 5 years are key, and the intensive investment and support will be provided in a cross-sector manner. Then by 2030, the countries try to create so-called 100 zero carbon areas, like model areas, will be developed by 2030. And then it aims to make a domino effect from this 100 to all over Japan towards 2050. So this is a roadmap detail you can download from this site. Yeah, I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Junko-san, for this very nice, comprehensive presentation. I'm really very interested in the results of your empirical study at local governments in Kyushu. And I think we can discuss that in more details later on in the second half of the workshop.